Hello, ladies. It's such a pleasure to meet you.
Likewise. Thanks for taking the time.
No
Lovely.
problem. So I must start out by saying this film is really beautiful. It's just breathtaking. I loved it. I know you know we did what's called a Needle cast. Needle is like a new radio-based app that I've been working with to promote, and we did a conversation about the film a couple of weeks ago, and it went really well. Everyone that heard us talk about it was like, "Where can I see it? Where can I see it?" Like, it's not out yet. It's making its screening rounds, but we'll let you know as soon as it's widely available. But yeah, so I actually am a gender specialist. I work in international development, and I began writing about 12 years ago, more so to tell the stories of the women that I was working with around the world and some of the challenges that they faced and things that I was facing as a woman working in different countries. Realities are quite different from place to place, particularly from what I had known growing up in the United States. I am bicultural. My mother is Hispanic. My father is African American. So I have, a little bit of a mixed background, but it's still not the same as living and working in a foreign country. And so, as a writer and with my media company, I really try to highlight stories that showcase women from different cultures, different walks of life, and perspectives, particularly those that we don't know that much about. And I feel in the United States, when it comes to Native Americans, we really don't know anything. Tell me a little bit about yourselves and your background and how you got on this journey.
Okay, I guess I'll go.
Okay.
um, well, I'm Rika Zetapji. I go by Rika. And I'm a filmmaker, director, and producer, and mostly been working in documentaries, but also have a background in fiction as well. And always kind of, I think, gravitate towards, or at least so far have gravitated towards stories that are centered on women's issues, or maybe not even issues, but hopefully like empowering stories around women. And kind of entered this project through um, another project that I did called Period End of Sentence, which highlighted the stigma around menstruation, specifically in northern India, and just have really, I think, wanted to continue adding to the conversation around menstruation, and specifically was really, I think, attracted and inspired by this particular story and this particular family because of like the love and the positivity that they exude, and how they sort of, in my mind, serve as like a model for how we should be treating young women when they first menstruate. So really just like wanting to be additive and sort of flip the narrative that I think we've all heard around menstruation, which is often like something that's shameful or negative, or something that, like, people are embarrassed by. So really hoping to flip that.
Hi, my name is Shandine Tome, and I am from Albuquerque, but I am Diné or Navajo. And I guess I got involved in this project mostly through the Indigenous lens. I've worked a lot on projects of my own and of others people in both documentary and narrative with my film. And so like I think it all like circles and stems around like Indigenous subjects or indigeneity in general. And so my work isn't maybe nearly as focused as something that I guess like that would have like a specific theme, except for like indigeneity. And so like I think I've had the privilege of being able to explore so many different avenues of life and ways of living with an Indigenous lens. And I think it's like really opened my mind and curiosity to, I guess, like what I see and what I know and how I can add to that narrative. And so with this story specifically, I think it was really amazing to be able to, I guess, like feel from the family that they're so like modern and they're here today. And I feel like that is stems from all the work that they've done and all their ancestors have done in the past to like really allow them to be here and to be present and to live through their culture in a way that is so specific, but like is the story of a lot of Native people today. And so I think it was really awesome to be able to explore that, and with that see positivity and see excitement and just like the will to live and focus on the future. And so like I think it was really awesome to be able to just be in that, and like to also like supplement Rika's side of like menstrual equity, and like try to find other ways and other avenues of like telling stories and like joining forces and like creating something that was like going to be so much bigger than ourselves.
Right. So what made you to choose this particular family? I know you said you were drawn to this family. So what about this family in particular?
Well, the family, I don't think like I anticipated the family to truly be as incredible as they are. I mean, I think that's like a process and a journey of getting to know one another over time, and then sort of like letting us in little by little. But initially, it was a blog post by Pim Allen that she had posted online about her older daughter Ty's Ihuk ceremony. And I remember, we were reading that and just thinking, wow, this is incredible. And it just already feels like it's, it was exciting because it was like looking at a community that has always celebrated menstruation and celebrated women. And I think why that was important was because it wasn't something that like, people just jump on the bandwagon of like social media movements, and not to say that's a bad thing to support a movement, maybe if you didn't support it before, but just really interested at looking communities that like this was sort of ingrained in their culture. And not only ingrained in their culture, but like they've done the work. This past generation has done the heavy lifting of like bringing it back. And that felt just really important and empowering. And so basically we connected with Pim early on and found out that like her younger daughter, Ati, had just menstruated, and the family was now preparing for her ceremony. And just, it kind of like the stars kind of aligned in that way. I think more than anything, it was that Pim was interested in telling a story about about like their traditions. And that was another really big factor, because of course there's a lot of hesitation around sharing, about ceremony or sharing about traditions, because of, cultural appropriation, or because of, that sort of being misused, that information being misused in a lot of way in the past. And so for Pim to be open and to want, and not just Pim, but like her family and her community to support her in that, that was really sort of a key thing. So that was really exciting kind of in that initial phone call, and then over time as we got to know all of them.
Now, the fact that this particular community celebrates menstruation the way that they do, is this something that's common amongst Native American cultures, or is this unique with them?
It's actually pretty common. There's different types of coming of age ceremonies, not just with women, but with young men too. Like for instance, my community, Navajo, has a kinot, which is like pretty much the same thing. When a young girl first menstruates, she goes through basically a ceremony of like 5 days, and she goes through these different aspects. Like obviously there's like differences and like reasons why, like in those similarities, like there is different trajectories, but I think like it all kind of stems around usually like the community coming together to uplift somebody, but there is so many different paths. Like no one tribe is the same at all. And so like I think history affects a lot of that, like stories, like origin stories, like all of these different things that like really allow the culture to thrive in different ways, which is like beautiful to like see the differences and also like celebrate the similarities.
Right, right. One of the things that we talked about in our needle conversation was that it reminded my aunt and myself, who screened the film together, about rites of passage ceremonies in Africa. And many of those ceremonies don't happen anymore. Most countries and the cultures within those countries have all either assimilated to Islam or Christianity. And the observations that they still hold are tied to those two religions. And so, a lot has been lost in terms of indigenous practices. And knowing what we know about Native Americans and all that the different Native American cultures have had to endure over time, it really is quite amazing that people have been able to sustain their belief systems and their cultural practices. I know that Pym said in the documentary that they had not had been doing the ceremony for a long time. Talk to you at all about how different they saw themselves versus the children who have had the ceremony? What do you think of the importance of maintaining these types of traditions?
Yeah, I think like exactly what you're saying about like the distance and amount of time that it takes for somebody to hold on to something and like keep that and carry on that tradition forward. Pim mentions often that like West California was impacted by colonization a lot later than most of like the Americas and like East and like that sort of thing. And I think like colonization didn't hit quite it hit hard, but it didn't hit quite as early as a lot of other people. And so they were able to maintain and hold on and resurge and like revitalize like their ceremonies and their traditions in a relatively like close amount of time. And so like I think whereas like I guess like different tribes have different I guess like courses of history, there is a lot of emphasis within Pim that feels as though like generationally there is trauma, but like at the same time there's like a lot of momentum moving forward. And I think that's like so incredible that like the person, I mean, like Pim's generation themselves are like willing to like kind of hold the brunt of that and like kind of give a future for Ati and like her children and like that sort of thing. That really feels selfless in a kind of way. And so like I think there's something really beautiful about that and about their community that like is different than a lot of communities. Like I think there's a lingering of trauma that is still like had to like it takes a lot of undoing basically, and I'm like that, and I think like it's really difficult to try and find space for like what is the future, like what traditions do we have, and like how close are these traditions that we're holding to like what was actually done in the past too, because then there's like the question of like is this even like the correct way and like that sort of thing, and like what are we making of ourselves here. But I think like the most important thing that like at least I hear from Pim is that like they're in it together and they're moving forward, and like they're also willing to adapt as well. And I think that's something that's like so key to like who they are and who like Native people are, who people of color are, is like our ability to adapt to forces that have like tried to push us off of like our track basically. And so like in like a small way, like Pim was like talking about like people's different diets and like how like some of them are gluten free, and now they need to like make sure that they can like allow for like gluten free diets within like the ceremony itself. Or like Ati, like at the end of the ceremony she like jumps up and she reaches up, and it was originally like wishing for like a male partner, but now it's like just a partner, like it doesn't have to be like
Wow.
like, so there's like so many different trajectories and willingness to adapt to today's like modern like circumstances that I think is like really cool and shows like a lot of like how like in a way like how we get by as I guess marginalized people.
That's very interesting. I was actually going to ask, I was thinking when you mentioned the change from asking for a male partner to just a partner, because it did talk a lot about, roles for women and roles for men. The social commentary of today, we talk a lot about the spectrum of gender and, sexual identity and these traditional beliefs where it's very dichotomous, male, female, straight heteronormity is something that I think younger generations don't fully embrace the way older generations do. I know when I was growing up, that's really all I knew. That's all I saw. That's all anyone talked about. But for my child who's 17, he lives in a whole different world where it's very commonplace for him to have friends that are gender fluid, to have friends that have same-sex parents. And I was really wondering, how these types of traditional ceremonies would evolve, knowing the social cultural landscape that we're now in around gender and sexual identity. So it's very interesting that you mentioned that. That's a very unique change. And I wonder if it's something that other communities can learn from.
Yeah, I think it's different from tribe to tribe and like even like groups of people to different groups of people. Like I think there's those who are willing to embrace and adapt and create momentum and strength through that. But then there's also those who are very traditional in a way, and they like want to hold on to that tradition so much that they're willing to, I guess, like allow other people to like not be able to experience like this way of life, I guess. And so like I think it shifts, like it's so definitely a spectrum like wherever you go. And I think there are like a lot more talks about it now though, and like a lot of like how do we make space to make sure we're not excluding future generations of people from being able to celebrate who they are.
That's very interesting. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Change is a part of the human condition, so we learn and we grow and we adapt. It's beautiful. Thinking about Ati and her life and just how having the opportunity to participate in this ceremony and having, this warmth and wrap around, of community and family and culture, celebrating something that's very natural and very necessary for the human species to continue. But for most women, it's something that's met with shame and, disgust, and it's traumatic. I don't know any girl or woman who, went through that period without feeling some sort of trauma associated, either, fear that, oh my God, I'm going to have a leakage in public at some point, shame about shopping and having to buy maxi pads. One of the people on our conversation talked about the first time they had to buy maxi pads in the store, and having to put every single thing in the basket to cover it up because, oh my God, you don't want someone to know that you're on your period. I was just imagine, how something like this would impact her and her sense of self and her sense of well-being. And not only how it would make her feel about her body and, all that it can do, but also how it makes her feel about herself just as a person. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on that, if any of those themes resonate in what you were trying to do in telling this story. Because I think that for young girls today, I would hope that we can leave a legacy where they don't have to feel this type of shame and stigma about something that is inevitable.
To answer your question, I remember because I've sort of seen both extremes with working on period end of sentence and then now this. It's sort of like a huge contrast between the two different worlds. I remember like being in northern India and a lot of women actually didn't know what was happening to their bodies for most of their life when they would menstruate, just because they sort of were, they would never talk to anyone about it, or they were being told that they have an illness, something is wrong with them. And a lot of times they didn't even know that menstrual hygiene products existed. And for the women who did know about pads, they were often afraid to go to the store because a lot of the shopkeepers were men. And when you would go, we actually went and bought a pack of pads at a shop, and a man like put the pack of pads in an incense box and put it in 2 layers of black plastic, so that no one would see or know, if you're like walking back with a pack of pads in your hands. So that was like sort of, one side of it that, I was exposed to. And then working on this film, the reason why the film happened and that the family even really wanted to move forward with it was really, I think Pim always says, because of Ati. And Ati saying that and believing that if we could, just change one girl's life, if one girl can watch this film and know that, this is something to be proud of or something to be empowered by, she knowing that like she's made a difference just by sharing her story, like that was enough for her to want to do the film, even if it, could be uncomfortable. She's like 13, and it's something that is really important to the family and sacred, but her kind of being open to that because she knew that the impact that the film would have at that young of an age, I think just goes to show that this isn't something that popped up when she first menstruated. This is something that she's been taught and has observed of the women around her for her entire life. And I think that's really what we've learned is the power of the ceremony, even though the ceremony itself takes place over the course of 4 days. It's something that is really going to be with her for the rest of her life. Not just before the ceremony and preparation, but also after the ceremony, and how all the women, men, doesn't matter who, like from the community, have a responsibility to play a part in other people's ceremony. And that means that there's like that lifelong support there. So it was really just interesting to see how Ati and like her cousins would talk about coming of age, talk about becoming a woman, and how that was different maybe from some other people, just because they looked forward to it. They knew that it meant that they would have a role in their family and their community and all the things that their family would do. And I think just taking a step back and looking at the person and seeing seeing them carry themselves like that at 13 years old, it just, you get excited because you think about all the possibilities that are going to be open for her in the future, and all the things that she's going to do with that sort of, confidence. Yeah. And I really do hope that people who, I hope that Indigenous girls watch this film and feel, excited and empowered to embrace their culture more, and just look to Ati and just feel that love. And I think that healing that's around Ati and the community. And for non-Indigenous people as well to watch that and go, wow, this is how we should treat people in our community. This is how we should think about menstruation. This is how we should think about women, and how we should not, these are the specific things that we need to do, and we need to take the traditions, but how do we look to ourselves and our own communities and basically find our own way of doing things that is going to bring positivity and healing to the world.
That's perfect. That's a perfect note to end on. I could ask you more and more questions. I don't want to spoil the film for everyone out there who hasn't seen it yet, because it really is beautiful. I mean, the cinematography is beautiful. You feel as if you are drawn into their world. The way the family's relationships are shown, I love that everyone is involved from young to old, men, women, children. It's just a beautiful story. And as you said, Raka, it really does show that we have the power to impact each other if we so desire, and it does start with how we see each other, how we think about each other. It's not so much what we do, because that comes after. We have to start with our mentality. And for me, that is the power of this film, is that it's universal in that message, is that it talks about how we need to change the lens through which we look at women and girls as they start to transition in their bodies. And I just thought it was just an amazing piece. So again, thank you both for your time. I really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thanks
Thank you
so
so
much. Thank you,
Thank you so
Diane.
much. It's a pleasure.
Thanks, Diane.
awesome. Have a great rest of your day. Bye,
You
guys.
too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again.